Hello, I'm Lucy from Bookshanks and I'm here today to talk you through the 6 books that I read for the BookTube Prize quarterfinals. Hello, welcome back to our channel. Lovely to see you again if you're a subscriber. If not, please do hit that subscribe button. We would love to get to know you and chat about books. Today I am here to talk about the BookTube Prize quarterfinals. So for anyone that's not following the BookTube Prize, it's really good. You should be. It's run by Barter Hordes. I will link to his channel below and also to the website he's created. And we are now at the closing stages of the quarterfinals, ready to move on to the semi-finals. So I read 6 books as part of the quarterfinals. The idea is that then a group of people will read the same books, they will rank them in order of 1 to 6, and the top 3 will progress to the next round, sort of the collective top 3. So I'm going to count you back from the 6 books that I read, starting with number 6, up to the top, so you can see which books I liked in what order, what I voted through, and then we can compare them to what has actually advanced to the next round. Because there's 6 books and I'm not very good at being concise, I will try my hardest to whiz you through what I thought, the strengths and the weaknesses, and a little bit about each of them. So, shall we start? Do I need to tell you what the 6 books are? No, I'm just going to go through. I'm just going to go through and tell you what I thought. So, the 6th book, so essentially my least favourite, but coming with a great big caveat actually up front, that I enjoyed all of these books. There was not a bad book in the bunch by any stretch. And particularly the ones in the middle, you know, if you'd have got me on a different day, I might have put them in a different order, because I really did actually enjoy all of them. But the one I kind of sort of enjoyed least was Bitter Orange by Claire Fuller. Now, this is a suspense book, really. It is a kind of mystery suspense book, but a literary one and kind of sort of a gentle one as well in lots of ways. It follows a woman who is spending the summer in an old, disused British countryside mansion. She has been asked by the owner to go document sort of all the things that are in and around the garden, at the same time as a man has been asked to document everything that is inside this derelict, falling apart house. The man brings along his slightly eccentric but utterly beautiful other half, and the woman kind of develops a bit of a fascination with this couple, which is compounded by the fact that she is in the attic room and finds a spy hole to look down into where they are staying. Now, what unfolds is really all around their relationships and their histories. The strengths of this book are absolutely the atmosphere that Fuller creates around this old, falling apart house and how it feeds into the tension in the story. The sense of place is really vivid, really enjoyable. I liked that a lot. The weaknesses of this book, I think, are that the ending was a little bit predictable. So the tension that builds up to it is really fantastic. And then I was like expecting to have my expectations subverted a little bit, and that didn't necessarily come true. And also, because of this absolutely fabulous, really creepy spy hole, I wanted more made of that. Actually, it was sort of underused, I felt. I wanted, you know, there to be a little bit more, I just thought she could have dragged more out of the spy hole. I wanted to see that. The other thing that I didn't necessarily love about this book was that there were quite long periods of time where characters were telling other characters about their history. And I felt that if we needed to know those things, I wanted to see them woven a little bit more into the narrative, I guess, rather than sort of, you know, pages of conversation about other people's pasts. But overall, you know, it's a really good suspense story, and actually one that's not got those big gasp-worthy moments, but that does have these little twists and turns along the way, which build in a really satisfying way, and overall make it, you know, a pretty enjoyable read. I said up front that actually maybe if you'd have got me on a different day, I might have ordered the books in a slightly different way. And the next 4 books were the ones that I was talking about, because I really enjoyed all of them. None of them are perfect books, obviously, but actually they have all got something really, really brilliant about them, and actually are all kind of similar in lots of ways, because they're all about outsiders and people who live on the fringes and the challenges that those things raise. So all of these books, I think, are pretty worth reading. But the one that I put in spot number 5 was The Great Believers by Rebecca Mackey. Now, this is a split narrative that flips between a woman called Fiona in 2015 who is travelling from America to Paris to look for her estranged daughter, and the 1980s, in which a group of men in Chicago are dealing with the absolute horror and onslaught of the AIDS epidemic. And actually Fiona's brother during that period has died. So actually we start the book, I guess, at his funeral. So the narrative then flips between these 2 different periods and looking really at the fallout of grief and loss, and how you get on and survive through life when you've had to deal with such devastating circumstances earlier on. And I guess a little bit about memory as well, and how how that feeds into sort of the grief process, I think. And I thought that it was really, really well done. I liked it a lot. For me, the strength of this book was those characters. I think they were incredibly detailed, they had real depth, and they were really emotionally wrenching. You absolutely rooted for them. And the tension that came from rooting for them, particularly in the period of the 1980s. And it sounds really, hideously morbid, but the tension comes from, just this utter dread of who it is that is going to live and who is going to die as a result of the AIDS epidemic. And it's really well done in terms of the historical context, building up these people in this gay community that is just being absolutely savaged, whilst the world sort of goes on around them, and they're having to deal with the sort of the judgment that comes with this disease, which is just utterly not their fault. So I thought that actually was the real strength of the novel. And as well, the other strength I'd say is probably the plot. I did find it really page turning, and it's got a lot of layers to it. There are a lot of subplots going on, which really propelled me forward through the narrative. The weakness, I guess it comes, with having dual narratives, and it's probably true for some of the other books as well, is that there's probably always strands that are slightly better executed than the other, or that you engage with more on a personal level. And for me, the story of Fiona in 2015 looking for her daughter wasn't as compelling or as emotional as the strand that took you through the AIDS epidemic in the 80s. So, for a different reader, that might not be an issue. But for me, they were my overall thoughts. Right, what did I pick next? Oh, yeah, you see this one, when I put the results in to Barter Hordes, and then I was like, oh, should that have been higher? I don't know. Because it's really good. Happiness by Aminata Fauna. Now, this is, again, a dual narrative. It follows a Ghanaian man called Attila, who is in, I think, his late 50s. He's a psychiatrist, and he has come to London to look for his niece and great nephew, therefore. He finds the niece pretty quickly. He does not find the great nephew. So his story is pretty much trying to look for this boy. And the other side of the narrative is a middle-aged, divorced American woman who has also come to London, kind of to escape the things that she was unhappy with in America, but, under the pretense of studying urban foxes in London. Now, these two meet by coincidence and form this really, really lovely friendship, unexpected friendship. And Jean helps Attila look for his nephew, by enlisting the support of all the people that she originally enlisted to help her monitor the foxes. So people like street sweepers and doormen and traffic wardens, and kind of this community which Aminata Fauna is sort of saying, they're predominantly an immigrant community like the two main characters, but they're sort of invisible immigrants in this enormous city which relies on them to survive, but yet at the same time doesn't really want to acknowledge that they're there. Kind of like the foxes, although they're not relying on them obviously, but sort of the ignored parts of London. And actually London is brilliant, I nearly swore in this book. London is really, really brilliantly portrayed, and that's one of the strengths of the book. But actually, I think this could probably be an immigrant story about any big city, really, that I have encountered, certainly. It's about people on the fringes, and that is one of the real strengths of this book. How Fauna, it sounds really rubbish word to say humanises these people, but actually portrays them in a really sympathetic way. And the reason that that is so powerful is because so often they are not portrayed in a sympathetic way, or they're just not portrayed at all. And actually I really, really loved that about this book. I found it incredibly insightful. If there is a weakness about this book, it's probably that at times it slipped into being a little bit lectury around some things. I did feel, particularly towards the end, that I was being lectured a little bit, which is never, the best experience in fiction. But overall, it's really good. And actually, I should say, there's some flashback bits as well, where we sort of learn about Jean and Attila and their past and what has brought them to this place. And I liked Attila's flashbacks more than I liked Jean's. So he, as a psychiatrist, and had worked in a lot of war zones and in really high pressure situations. And I found those really, moving flashbacks, whereas Attila's were more sort of detail about the foxes, but how they interact with humans, how we coexist and things like that, which I did enjoy, but just not quite as much. So if there were bits that I skimmed over a little bit, it was probably there. So Happiness by Aminata Fauna, really good read. Like that one a lot. Right, okay, what number are we up to? 3? I'm going to call it 3. Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. Now, anyone who has subscribed to our channel will know I was a big fan of this book. It was one of my favourite reads of last year. It only made 3 on this, possibly because I'm sick of the sound of myself banging on about it rather than anything else. It is a retelling of the Trojan War through the eyes of Briseis, who was Achilles' sort of spoils of war. He was the woman that he claimed as his own. I've done a full review on this, which I shall link down below. But in a nutshell, it's a really good book. The strengths of it, I loved how it looked at power dynamics, and particularly, people who don't have the power. It's looking at power dynamics from the perspective of people who are utterly powerless, and what little things that they can do to sort of reclaim that power. And the other strength for me was just the mind-blowing prose. It is so beautifully written. I absolutely love the way Pat Barker writes. It's just, it's belting. The weakness of this book actually was one that I didn't pick up on at the first time I read it. At the first reading, it didn't bother me, but I've seen other people level this criticism at it since, and I do kind of think it's fair to say, and worth saying, that for a book that pitches itself, as a feminist novel, basically, through the eyes of the women who are, captive in this war situation, there is quite a lot of Achilles as well. And perhaps there could be even more of that female viewpoint. But actually, I'm going to go straight back to strengths again, because the other thing that I really loved about this book was how it's a retelling of a Greek myth, and yet it is made so incredibly contemporary in the way that it's done, and the messages that are filtered through in a really subtle way are just you know, they're really, really relevant to sort of politics today. So I loved that as well. I've done a lot of thumbs up in this video, sorry. Right, so number 2, I have chosen There by Tommy Orange, a book that's been huge on BookTube and clearly in the US, but maybe not quite so well known in the UK. It follows a group of Native Americans who are coming together for the big Oakland powwow. They don't necessarily know each other at the start of the book, and they move in these absolutely brilliant concentric circles, like getting closer and closer through the narrative towards this powwow in the most unsettling of ways. There is this threat of violence that runs through this book, which is really, really fabulous. And the characters, I mean, there's a huge diverse cast, and they are really, really wonderful. I mean, we have people who, a drug dealer who suffers from fetal alcohol syndrome. We have a Native American documentary maker. We have kids who are mixed race, who are grappling with this sort of suppressed identity and wanting to sort of find out who they are. And they move, in these really amazing, powerful concentric circles towards this central point, which is the big Oakland powwow. And I really, really like this book. As a British person, actually, Native Americans are not something that we learn about in any great depth. I mean, you kind of only get shown the Hollywood version of events. And what I thought was so brilliant about this book was that it sort of just takes, you know, modernizes everything for you. It says, you know, this is not really what happened. You know, it might have happened in a very small part, but actually this is who Native Americans are now, and this is what we're having to deal with, and this is you know, the present day of our reality, and it is done in just an utterly compelling way. I think you know, Tommy Orange comes up with probably the best description of what makes your cultural identity that I've ever really read. He talks about, you know, how it basically boils down to the memories that you don't remember. So what is filtered down through you sort of tacitly, without you necessarily even knowing, all the things that your ancestors have had to deal with, which you know, are the building blocks of your culture. And I love the way that he talks about that. It's really, really powerful, and absolutely the strength of this novel for me. And yeah, how each of these characters is affected by those memories, by that filtering down through the years, which will come together to produce these really believable and deep and complex and troubled characters, and this thread of just this impending violence that runs through. I'm just not being very articulate, but it's, you know, it's a good read. It's a really good read. If there's a weakness, it's probably actually the size of the cast is so huge that it is kind of hard sometimes to always keep on top of who is who, because you've got a lot of viewpoints, but then you've also got a lot of peripheral people as well who are talked about in the viewpoints, and you're not necessarily always sure who it is you want to follow, because whether you'll see them again, and who to invest in. But I really, really liked it. And I guess actually I spoke about it earlier, didn't I, in terms of viewpoints. When you do have so many different viewpoints, some you will engage with more than others, and that is true of this novel. But overall, I just think the power with which Tommy Orange takes these enormous political messages and cultural messages and social messages and puts them into just beautiful, lyrical, powerful, emotional prose is, you know, a real accomplishment. So like that one a lot. What I've put as number 1 though, anyone who knows the groups, is pretty obvious really, isn't it? Red Clocks by Lenny Zumas. I picked this as my top read of can't even remember, was I Group A? Group A. Now this book is a dystopian / speculative fiction novel set from the viewpoints of 4 women, with a bonus one thrown in. each who are grappling with a crackdown of legislation in the US over reproductive rights, basically. So in this version of the US, abortion is absolutely, completely and utterly outlawed, along with a whole host of other laws. For example, you must be a two-parent family to adopt. IVF is illegal because they can't consent to being implanted, things like that. So it's taking this really hardline America and translating it into four viewpoints, the viewpoints of four women who are having to navigate this. So, you know, a teenager with an unwanted pregnancy, you know, a woman who really feels her biological clock is ticking but has not met the right man, a woman who is sort of a medicine woman trying to help women on the slide performing abortions, and another woman whose marriage is falling apart, who does have children. They also have put in, or the woman who is currently trying to conceive is also a biographer, and she is writing the story of a woman from several hundred years ago, can't remember, who is usurping traditional female roles and going out into the world on her own as an explorer. So we are seeing how the power dynamics over women's bodies and what's expected of them has changed through the centuries, and also not really changed through the centuries. And I thought this was a really, really good read. The reason I put it top is probably because of just how relevant it is. I think it's a couple of years old now. Well, it can't be that old, can it? Because it's in this prize. So it must have been last year. Came out last year. And in the course of like a year, you know, you feel like it's not really fiction. You feel like this is bordering on, you know, what could become, what already in part is starting to become. And it's really chilling. And I know that it means that some people will really not like this book because it is just so overtly political. But for me, you know, I thought it was a really powerful read. And I also like how it deals, aside from the sort of issues of women's bodily autonomy, it looks at competition between women and sort of this striving for perfection that's born in the social media age. And although there's not actually really any social media in here, it's feeding into those messages about what it is that we should be striving for and how we should be striving for it, and whether in order to achieve it we need other people to fail at achieving it. And I found that really powerful. I guess, again, bit boring. The weakness, again, probably is the different viewpoints did not hold equal weight for me. I found some of them more compelling than others. And also, I guess, the fact that as the novel progresses, you don't necessarily feel that the women are making unexpected choices. They kind of make the choices that you think that they're going to make. But the flip side of that is that they then feel very believable in the ways that they do them. You know, there's no moment of, well, that is just not what someone would have done in that situation. You feel that despite the fact that the choices are predictable, they're satisfying because they are therefore believable. So for me, Red Clocks took the cake. It did not, however, take the cake for the rest of the readers. So the books that made it through from this group were They're There, Silence of the Girls, and Happiness. And actually, despite the fact that Red Clocks isn't there, I'm pretty happy with that because, and I'd have been pretty happy if The Great Believers made it through as well, because I really genuinely felt like all of these were really worthwhile reads. And I mean, it's kind of hard on Bitter Orange to say that's the only one that I wouldn't have wanted to see go through. And I think it's to do, you know, with my perceptions of prizes, I guess, and what I like to read. And although Bitter Orange was a good book, it didn't have, I guess, that depth to message that I like to see in books. And I think that Elevate elevate the things that I read in my mind. So that is like a personal taste thing, but all books are anyway. So all the other 5 books did have those qualities, that message that elevated them as reads in my mind. So the whole semi-final list is now out. As I said at the beginning, I will link to the books below. Would love to know if you've read any of these books, what you thought, whether you'd have ranked them differently from me, or what you think of the semi-final list in general, whether you're going to do any reading along, anything you want to talk about, please do talk to me in the comments below. I always love having a good chat. I need to find something else to read now, don't I? So I'm taking suggestions. In the meantime, please do check out bookshanks.com and the app's completely free. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you on the other side. Thanks for watching.